For Christmas, my father handed me a neatly wrapped box with that smug little grin he always wore when he thought he was being clever. Inside was a book titled How to Grow Up. My sister, meanwhile, was waving 2 plane tickets to Europe, a family reward for her responsibility. They laughed, told me maybe this would finally help me get my life together. So I smiled, thanked them, and spent the rest of Christmas dinner pretending I didn't feel like the punchline of their joke. But that night, sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, I read that book cover to cover. And the next morning, I followed its advice. I grew up, the way they screamed when they realized what growing up really meant. Let's just say that little gift ended up costing them a whole lot more than $12.99. Hello, my name's Lauren Walsh, and that Christmas was the year my family finally handed me the last piece of my freedom, wrapped in shiny red paper and tied with a bow. We were all gathered in my parents' grand living room in Raleigh, North Carolina, surrounded by twinkling lights and the faint smell of cinnamon candles. Mom was fussing over the table, Dad was bragging about his golf game, and my sister Hannah was twirling around in her designer heels, showing off her new engagement ring like it was a crown jewel. I sat on the edge of the couch, holding a mug of lukewarm cocoa, trying not to feel like the extra chair at someone else's dinner party. Every year it was the same thing. Hannah, the golden girl, got praised for her smart choices and steady relationship. Me? I got polite smiles and awkward pauses whenever I mentioned my freelance work. Oh, still doing that graphic design thing? My father would ask, as if I'd just said I was collecting bottle caps for rent money. But this year, he had something special for me. Lauren, Dad said, sliding a neatly wrapped box toward me with that smug grin that always meant I was about to be humiliated in a new and creative way. I found something that might help you focus your life a little. The room chuckled softly, even Hannah covering her mouth to hide her smirk. I tore the paper slowly, heart pounding until the title came into view. How to Grow Up, a Practical Guide to Responsibility and Success. For a second, I thought it was a joke. I waited for someone to laugh, to say, "Gotcha." No one did. Dad leaned back, grinning like he'd just gifted me a life coach. Thought it might be time, sweetheart. You're almost 30. Maybe this'll help you figure things out. Mom tried to soften it. It's thoughtful, honey, really. But the damage was done. Hannah giggled behind her champagne glass. Meanwhile, she unwrapped a pair of plane tickets to Europe. Business class. Her fiancé's name printed neatly beside hers. "Merry Christmas," Dad said proudly, patting her shoulder. "For our responsible girl. You deserve a little adventure before the big day." The kind of silence that hums filled my chest. I forced a smile, nodded, and said the only thing I could. "Thanks, Dad. Guess I've got a lot of reading to do." That night, back in my tiny one-bedroom apartment, I set the book on my coffee table and stared at it. The cover mocked me with bold blue letters and a cheesy smiling man in a suit. Grow up. As if I hadn't been doing that since I was 15, paying my own phone bill, working side gigs, pretending not to hear the way my parents compared me to Hannah behind closed doors. I poured myself a cheap glass of wine and opened the first page. Growing up means taking ownership of your choices. If your life isn't where you want it to be, stop waiting for someone else to fix it. I scoffed, but I kept reading. Page after page, it was full of cliches I'd normally roll my eyes at. But somewhere between invest in yourself and stop explaining your worth, something shifted. I realized maybe they were right, not about me being immature, but about one thing: no one was coming to save me. If I wanted respect, I'd have to earn it on my own terms. I picked up my laptop and opened a fresh spreadsheet. At the top, I typed 2025, the year I grow up, for real. It started small: budget tracking, client goals, savings targets. Then came business ideas, notes about forming an LLC, building a portfolio, pitching to bigger clients. By 2 a.m., I had a plan, and for the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I was ready. The next morning, Hannah sent a family group photo from the airport. "Off to Paris." The caption read, followed by a selfie of her and Dad grinning ear to ear. Mom texted back a string of heart emojis. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked around my small but quiet apartment, the walls bare, the desk cluttered with sketch pads and unpaid invoices, and felt something new: ownership. If I was the family disappointment, Fine. But from now on, I'd be a self-made one. I went to the bookshelf, grabbed the How to Grow Up book, and scribbled in the inside cover, Step 1, don't let anyone else write your story. Then I closed it and got to work. Over the next few weeks, I kept my promise to myself. I stopped chasing approval. I started saying no to family dinners that were really just judgment sessions. I signed up for a night course in business management and reached out to a few design firms for contract work. Each small step felt like reclaiming a piece of me I didn't realize I'd given away. One night, as I worked on a client's website mock-up, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Remember that book I gave you? Any progress yet? I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, Yeah, Dad, more than you think. I didn't hit send right away. Instead, I smiled, closed my laptop, and whispered to the empty room, Thanks for the push. Because what he thought was an insult had just lit the fuse. And as the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, fireworks lighting up the city outside my window, I raised my glass and toasted quietly to the night. To growing up, my way. The new year came with a strange quiet. No more family group chats, no more phone calls from Dad reminding me to be realistic. It was just me, my laptop, and the low hum of determination that never seemed to fade, even when exhaustion tried to pull me under. In January, I landed my first corporate client, a boutique travel agency that needed full rebranding. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I spent long nights learning things I didn't know I could. Tax forms, contracts, marketing proposals. Every little victory felt like a private rebellion against the voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my father's. Still, silence has its way of turning heavy. One Saturday, as I was cleaning up breakfast dishes, Mom called. Her tone was soft, that practiced sweetness she used when she wanted something. Lauren, honey, you've been so quiet lately. How's life? Busy, I said, rinsing my mug. Good busy. Oh, that's nice, she said quickly, before lowering her voice. Listen, your father's been talking. He's just worried about you, that's all. You know how he is? Worried? I laughed under my breath. He gave me a self-help book for Christmas, Mom. I think his message was pretty clear. She sighed. You know he just wants what's best for you. Maybe you could come over next weekend? Hannah's flying in, and it would be nice to have everyone together. The word everyone hit like a sting. I pictured Hannah in her designer coat, her fiancé in tow, the laughter, the comparisons. I'll think about it, I said, which, in my language, meant no. The following Monday, my life took another unexpected turn. I got an email from a publishing house in New York, one of the mid-sized firms I'd cold-pitched weeks ago. They were expanding their design team and had seen my online portfolio. They wanted to interview me. I almost dropped my coffee. I stared at the email for a long minute before replying, trying to sound casual while my heart beat like a drum. The interview was set for the following Friday. That whole week, I lived between nerves and fire. Every time I looked at my How to Grow Up book sitting on the desk, I smirked. Maybe the title wasn't so wrong after all. I was growing, just not in the direction they wanted. The night before my interview, I called Mom. Hey, I said, trying to keep it short. Just wanted you to know I've got an interview tomorrow. Big opportunity. Oh, she said, genuinely surprised. For what kind of job? Design work. A publishing firm in New York. There was a pause. Not the proud silence I was hoping for, but that familiar, uncertain one. Well, she said softly, that's interesting. But New York is so far, honey. You'd really leave everything here? Everything here. As if here had ever felt like home. I smiled to myself. Yeah, Mom, maybe that's the point. The interview went better than I could have dreamed. They loved my work, my ideas, and before I even got back home, I had an email waiting. We'd love to have you on board. Welcome to the team. I sat in silence for a full minute, staring at the words that would change everything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. Then I called Mom again. Hey, I got it, I said, trying to sound casual. You what? The job. Full-time. I'm moving to New York. The quiet on the other end stretched so long I thought the call dropped. Then finally, well, that's big news. Your father's here, do you want to tell him? No thanks, I said softly. You can. Lauren, she started, her tone worried now. Don't you think this is a bit sudden? Sudden? I laughed. Mom, I've been planning this for months. You just didn't notice. That weekend, I went back to the family house for what I knew would be the last time. I told myself it was to be polite, but deep down, I wanted to see them, to see how they'd react when I told them I wasn't the girl they left behind. Dad was in his usual spot by the fireplace, scrolling through his phone while Hannah sat across from him, freshly tanned and glowing from some trip abroad. "Well, look who's here," Dad said, glancing up. "Thought we'd lost you to your little projects," I smiled. "You might, actually. I got a job offer," his eyebrows lifted. "Oh, local?" "New York." That got his attention. He set the phone down. "New York City?" "Yeah, a publishing firm." For a moment, the silence in the room was delicious. Hannah's smile faltered. Mom blinked. Dad finally said, "Well, that's certainly ambitious. Hope you can handle it." The city's tough. There it was, not pride, but a test. The same test he'd been giving me since I was 12. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I'll be fine, Dad. I'm a grown-up now, remember?" Mom tried to diffuse the tension with forced laughter, but the air in the room had changed. They couldn't unsee it anymore. I wasn't the insecure daughter they could patronize. I was a woman who'd stopped asking for permission. That night, as I packed my suitcase back home, I slid the How to Grow Up book into the side pocket. Not out of sentiment, but as a symbol. It had started as a joke at my expense. Now it was proof that I'd turned their insult into my ignition. Before bed, I texted my mom one last time. "Dinner was nice. Don't worry, I'll send my new address soon. I'll be okay." Her reply came minutes later. "We love you, just don't forget where you came from." I stared at that message, then typed back, "Don't worry, Mom, I won't. It's exactly why I'm leaving." When I turned off the lights, the city outside my window was quiet. But inside, I felt something loud, a hum, a pulse, the sound of change. Silence wasn't empty anymore. It was power. New York didn't welcome me softly. It tested me from day one. The noise, the rush, the constant reminder that no one here cared who you used to be. And for the first time, I loved that. My apartment was tiny. One window, creaky floorboards, and a view of a brick wall. But it was mine. No judgments, no comparisons, no one telling me to grow up. Just me and the steady hum of possibility. At work, I threw myself into every project that came my way. By spring, I wasn't just designing book covers. I was leading campaigns. My boss, Amelia, noticed my drive and began mentoring me. "You've got something," she told me one night after a late pitch meeting. "Most people your age wait for permission to take space. You just take it." Her words hit deeper than she knew. Every paycheck I saved. Every bonus I invested. I built a life from scratch, smart, quiet, unassuming. And when people asked about my family, I smiled and said, "They're back home. I'm figuring things out." But deep down, I was doing more than figuring things out. I was building something they'd never expect. By the end of the year, I had launched my own side firm, a design consultancy registered under my name alone. The same little projects my father used to mock were now generating enough income to pay off my student loans and fund my independence. One evening, as I finalized my company registration, I reached into the drawer and pulled out the old Christmas book. How to Grow Up. I turned it over in my hands, smiling. Maybe Dad had been right about one thing. I did need to grow up. Just not his way. The next morning, I boxed up a few items, family photos, the book, a simple note, and mailed the package to my parents' address. The note said only, "You taught me to grow up." I finally did. Then I got dressed, walked to the office, and signed the partnership papers for my new company. When I saw my name printed beside the firm's seal, Lauren Hayes, founder, I realized my quiet takeover was complete. They thought they'd buried me under smallness and shame, but I had been learning the whole time how to build an empire in silence. It was almost poetic. The phone rang exactly 1 year to the day after that Christmas dinner. I was reviewing design drafts in my office when the name Mom flashed on my screen. I hadn't heard her voice in months. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something in me said, "Answer." "Lauren," she said, her tone shaky. "Your father, we're in a bit of a situation." Of course they were. It turned out Dad's retirement investment had collapsed. The house, that perfect home he used to lord over me, was under foreclosure. The sister who'd flown to Europe? Still abroad, apparently finding herself. They needed help. Specifically my help. We just need a little loan, Mom said. You're doing well, right? Your father says you have that job in the city. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city lights flicker through the window. The irony almost made me laugh. The same man who'd handed me a self-help book instead of a gift was now asking me for a bailout. Does Dad know you're calling? I asked, a pause. Then, he's embarrassed. You know how he is? Yeah, I knew exactly how he was. All right, I said calmly. Tell him I'll drive down tomorrow. When I arrived the next morning, the house felt smaller. The paint was peeling, the air heavy with desperation. Dad sat at the kitchen table, the same place he used to lecture me about being responsible. He didn't look up. So, your mother told you, I nodded. She did. We just need a bit of help getting through the next few months. You're doing fine now, right? I reached into my bag and slid something across the table. It was the same Christmas book he'd given me, How to Grow Up. Except this time, I'd tucked something inside, a cashier's check for the exact amount needed to save the house. His eyes lit up, but before he could speak, I said, You'll want to read the note first. He flipped open the book. On the title page, I'd written, Lesson completed. Growing up means knowing who deserves your help and who earned it. I watched as the color drained from his face. Lauren, that's not fair. No, I cut in. You're right. It's not fair. But neither was making a child feel small for dreaming. Neither was calling me ungrateful when I didn't measure up to your golden daughter. Silence filled the room. Mom looked between us, tears welling, but I didn't flinch. I'll send the funds directly to the bank, I said, standing. Not for you and for the house. For the memories that still belong to me. Dad's voice cracked. You've changed, I smiled. No, I just finally read the book. And with that, I left the house, the same way I left that Christmas dinner years ago. Except this time, I wasn't the lost girl clutching a hollow gift. I was the woman who had turned every insult into a blueprint for freedom. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a notification. The wire transfer confirmed. Lesson returned, and for the first time, I didn't feel the sting of their approval or the ache of their absence. Just peace, sharp, clean, earned. Before you see how peace looks after pain, tap subscribe. Because growing up isn't about age. It's about finally choosing yourself. Spring came to New York slowly that year. The kind of spring where you could finally open a window and smell rain mixed with coffee from the corner shop. I just finished a major campaign for a tech startup, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't rushing anywhere. One morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Lauren, my mother's voice came trembling small. Your dad? He lost his job. We might lose the house. There it was, the quiet twist life always seems to offer. A year ago, those words would have sent me spiraling into guilt and panic. But now, I just breathed. I'm sorry to hear that, I said softly. That must be hard. Silence filled the line. She was waiting for me to offer something as a rescue, a lifeline. But I'd already given them so much of my peace once. This time I had boundaries. I'm okay, Mom, I added gently, and I hope you both will be too. We exchanged a few awkward goodbyes, and when the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood at the window and smiled faintly at the sunlight crawling across my desk. That afternoon, I met my team at the cafe downstairs, the same one where I'd sketched my first company logo on a napkin. My assistant Clara handed me a folder. We got it, she said, grinning. Inside was the contract that made my firm the primary design partner for a national client. It meant security, growth, legacy. As they celebrated, I quietly stepped outside for air. The city hummed around me, horns, chatter, laughter. It was loud, imperfect, alive, and so was I. Later that night, I sat on my couch, sipping tea, and glanced at the one thing I'd kept from my parents. That old book. How to Grow Up. The corners were bent, the cover faded. I opened it to the first page where my father's handwriting still glared back at me. Maybe this will help you become someone worth respecting. I smiled, not bitterly this time, but softly. Because I had become someone worth respecting, just not by his definition. With a slow breath, I closed the book, tied it with a ribbon, and slid it into a drawer. Not to hide it, but to keep it as proof. Proof that even the ugliest lessons can bloom into something beautiful when you refuse to break. Outside, The city lights blurred into gold streaks against the night. I leaned back, watching them flicker, and whispered to myself, growing up isn't about leaving people behind. It's about finally walking your own way, without needing them to follow. And in that quiet bloom of peace, I realized I'd outgrown more than my past. I'd outgrown their idea of me entirely.